sacrifice things for the team at all times. Have to.
So is Xavier Worthy Deshaun Jackson or Philip Dorsett?
Ooh.
Yes.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Draft Vogel.
With the first pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. The first pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. With the first pick in the 2023 NFL Draft.
The sickest NFL Draft Show. It's gonna be sick.
And welcome into the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel. I'm John Vogel, the host. Mark Jarvis at Jarvis Scouting in the middle. Justin Gamble at Gam Scout all the way there on the end on your screen. If you're listening, sorry to be describing like this, but welcome in, gentlemen. I think this is going to be a good episode. Continuing off of where we left off. Everybody's feeling all right tonight?
I'm hungry, John. I mentioned that already. I'm really starving, so hopefully I'm not hangry during this episode. Yeah, you got moonshine at least. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
That'll solve your appetite for a bit.
What's your watching tape snack? Gam, what do you eat while you're watching tape?
Ooh, this is a good question.
So much stuff, dude. So much stuff. Last night I was eating.
Are you like one of these like junk food? Like you can eat all this junk food and it just leaves your body?
Well, yes, but I don't eat junk food anymore because it makes my tummy sick. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But luckily my metabolism's still good, so I'm still sexy even if I eat bad stuff. But last night I was eating a big ass, like from the grocery store. They sell like those packs that are like a huge ass. What is it? It's like a Subway sandwich, but it's like pre-packed.
Yeah.
And I thought I would save a bunch. I thought I'd eat like one square, and I had like 4 squares. Not the point. What are we talking about? But you know, sandwiches, Mark, Chex Mix. Yeah, I try to not eat stuff that makes my fingers dirty because then I'm touching everything.
Yeah,
I got the touch screen, and I made that mistake too many times back in the day. So
I always got to have something in a cup that I can kind of just kick back.
Yeah,
like
no Doritos,
trail mix or
no Cheetos. Yeah, exactly. Gummy worms, nice glucose right there.
Okay, so
Anyways.
This episode we wanted to kind of continue off where we left, and I think we've been talking about this now for like 2 episodes.
Trying to,
we're gonna make it 4 if you don't hurry up.
Yeah, man.
We're gonna let's get into guys that we think are either going to be really good and we could miss on for some reason, or we think that we're lower on that we could miss on.
Yeah, there's a lot of players in this class that I feel like could have like a wide variety of outcomes is what they are in the NFL. And those are the guys you kind of have to like plant a flag on one side or the other and, live with. Nice, John. And kind of live with whatever they become, knowing like, hey, I could be wrong. We've talked about Xavier Worthy. There's a lot of guys in this class that are like undersized or short-armed or whatever. I think the first one for me, and I look at this guy because last year we had Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State go in the first round at 6'1", 166 pounds, right? That was last year, right? I'm not crazy.
Year, I think, right?
Okay.
Forbes, Forbes last year.
So he's 6'1", 166. He runs 4.35, 32 and a half hand or arm, 32 and a half arm, 8 and a half hands. Yeah. This year we have Nate Wiggins, who's 6'1", 173. He's barely heavier than Emmanuel Forbes. He ran 4.28, but he actually had a full 1/10 of a second slower 10-yard split. He actually has shorter arms, 2-inch shorter arms, and a little bit bigger hands. Anyway, the point is...
And he pulled his hamstring like on the 30-yard line running that.
Bingo. Yeah, he pulled his hammy. But that's the thing is, so we saw Emmanuel Forbes go high and then kind of had a rough rookie year. Like once dude's figured out he's 165 pounds.
It's just not stable. I'm going to hold it. I didn't even touch it at the time. No.
So we see Emmanuel Forbes have a rough rookie year. Eventually, he just starts getting beat up by receivers left and right. I mean, we saw the Philly receivers just annihilate him a few times. There's so many games off the top of my head that I'm like, okay, that the size definitely became an issue, and the tackling became an issue just because at 165 pounds you can only do so much. Nate Wiggins this year on tape, it felt like always in recovery mode, always relying on that recovery speed. You could see the size and the lack of mass really affect his game. And it just felt like he wasn't necessarily the most nuanced corner. He was just living off that athleticism, much like he reminded me of Justin Gilbert, actually, the big-time bust like 10 years ago out of Oklahoma State that the Browns drafted was one of their 3 first-round picks. And I think that was the Manziel and the Trent Richardson year, where all 3 of them bust. Right.
I don't think Richardson went. I think Manziel.
So Gilbert,
Richardson first. Gilbert definitely came off the board same year. I think it was just those 2.
I thought they had three first-rounders that year. Am I crazy?
Do you remember Jarvis?
I was thinking that was the year with Whedon.
Oh,
I can look.
Gilbert might have been a year with Whedon.
They've had so many first-round busts and multiple first-round picks that are all bad. Nevertheless, so Wiggins is that guy that on tape I wasn't sold on. And then he comes to the combine, he yanks his hammy, he's 173 pounds. And we see him mocked high. What'd you find out, John?
It was Gilbert. Gilbert went 8th overall. Manziel went 22nd. Yeah. There was no other pick.
Okay, so the Richardson year was the Brandon Whedon year, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was 2012, which was
Browns
Richardson
and can't figure their lives out.
Okay. Well, I mean, they did take Joel Bittiano like the very next round, so there's one that they hit, and then Christian Kirksey after that.
So just don't. Their first round picks are rubbish, but everything else.
Well, not everything else, because when they went Terrence West and Pierre Desir. So,
see, they're not doing so hot.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, so Wiggins,
Kirksey's still in the league. Kirksey and Bittiano.
Yeah. No, Kirksey's. They're both. They have a good careers. But Wiggins, for me, I think I could miss on him because when you're this fast, athletic, and just kind of like a naturally smooth mover, like it's like he can be out of position the entire rep and still win the rep, and it's just because he kind of glides and flows around. It is so fast. Like I don't know. I don't know how he succeeds, to be honest with you. I don't know how you maximize him as a pro because in press he's too small. In off, I just don't want him colliding with people a lot. But look, there is a path for him to be Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie or someone along the lines of where that size doesn't necessarily affect him as much as I think it will. In today's NFL, I think with all the quick hitters and like tackling that needs to be done to the line of scrimmage and close to it, I don't think that suits him. But he's one of the few, or one of the many in this class, that I'm like, yeah, look, if I miss on him, I'll live with it. But I'm not planting my flag, in necessarily his draft stock as saying I would take him high. He's a guy that if I'm running a team, I'm leaving him on the board because I don't want to take that risk with a sub 180-pound corner. That's also 6'1", like that's a thin frame. And I don't know if we've all talked about how we feel about Wiggins, but yeah, he's not for me.
I don't think Wiggins has popped up on the show, but I agree with you completely in the fact that he's constantly in recovery. Constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, every single rep that you walk, I know, because if you look at looking at his, like after 20 yards, the 20 to 40 yard split, it was nuts. Let me pull that up real
so
quick.
Much faster. Because he had a 1.59 10 yard. And then he just zoomed after that.
Which 1.59 in the defensive back class was like third best or third worst.
Yeah.
Out of all the DBs that ran at the NFL Combine.
Like, for instance, or for reference, Emmanuel Forbes, the guy I kind of compared him to, or just look side by side, he ran a 1.48 10 yard as opposed to 1.59. But he ran a 4.35 instead of 4.28. So,
where are you seeing the 1.59?
It was what was.
I think it was on the
what do you have?
Yeah, it was on the Combine page.
Draft Scout has it 1.50. Which
makes
more sense because a 1.59 split for a 4.28 is just ridiculous.
It's almost impossible. But I thought that was the point.
Yeah,
I thought that was the whole thing with him, though. It's like he got so much. Look on NFL.com. I was just going off of what they had on their site from the Combine.
Yeah. I'm always iffy. This is people complain about using the 40 over the 10, but the issue is the 10. The measurement error is much higher because you're measuring in such a smaller amount of time. Yes, they have it 1.59 on the NFL site. So as an example, I want to give an example of how wide that gap is, right? So I'll give you like a percentile gap. I'm doing this because I want to show how wide this gap is. And okay, we need to talk about this. So a 4.28 is 99th percentile, almost 100th percentile, 40, right? A 1.59 is like middle of the pack for a corner, 55th percentile, versus a 1.50 would be 95th percentile. So huge gap between those two, depending on, and I'm going to lean on the 10 because the handheld time is 1:45 for the 10 split based on what Draft Scout has. So I would assume they just miss and put it on the NFL site.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do agree. Yeah. I do agree he tends to be in recovery a lot, but measured like a guy who ran very well.
Regardless, the last 20 yards, he went from a 2.52 20-yard split to a 4.28. So the last 20 yards, he went in like 1.76 seconds, basically.
Homeboy is flying, basically, is what we're trying to say.
Right. Yeah, that's what we're saying. He went 20 yards in less than 2 seconds. So when he's in recovery mode, it works because he does have that last burst. And typically when he's having to recover, he's got a vertical route that he's chasing, and he's already got that running start where he's already kind of in this recovery mode because he's like, oh shit, this guy's getting in front of me and he's chasing him. That was consistent on tape. I mean, it felt like every single rep that you see him make a play on the ball, he starts
just on his heels a lot. Initially.
And so I'm right there with you. I'm not seeing him.
I just think in the NFL as a corner, you got to bring the fight to like the wide receivers more, and you got to kind of impose your presence at all. And he doesn't do that at all to me. He's just kind of like a guy who's on the field, being a good athlete. He knows how to get into the right spot. But in the NFL, like there's too many big, versatile, athletic dudes that will catch the ball over you or be able to box you out because you're not willing to get your nose dirty. Agreed. So he's the first one for me.
Jarvie.
Oh, okay. Oh boy, I thought you were going to the second one for you. So I have. I was over here thinking about 10-yard splits and stuff. So Michael Penix. I feel like this is one that a lot of people are going to fall on this, where they could have him really, really high or really, really low. I tend to be very much on the low side. There's just something about the style. I don't think it's even the lefty. I think it's just how looping the motion is. Like he has this real looping, long, slow motion. And it feels like the angles are just really weird with it. He's a guy who I think being more impressive in the deep area rather than the short and intermediate. He just kind of like all the things I don't like in QBs. Like I like guys who are very efficient, quick release, work short and intermediate well, good outside of structure, can extend plays. Like
not him.
He's the opposite of every single thing that I look for in a QB. And then he has the medical on top of it too. So I thought more a 5th, 6th round type guy, just combination of the talent and then probably the medical on top of that. Like not a bad player, but not a guy that checks any of the boxes that I usually look for in a quarterback. So I'm fine with dying on that hill and saying, if he ends up being good and he's good in spite of all the concerns I have about the style he has and the way he plays the game, then I'll live with it. But that's like everything I've learned over the past, 7-8 years has taught me to not like that type of quarterback.
Well, it's tough to watch a guy not be able to like slide and reset and think that that'll work in the NFL. Like he's I don't know if we were talking about this before, but he's the guy that really has to get everything like really set perfectly. His feet got to be good. His delivery has to be good. He can't really throw when his hips or shoulders aren't aligned nicely or like pointing the right direction. And that's tough to think that can hold up in the NFL because you're going to have to avoid pressure. You're going to have to make throws on the run, not even on the run, but just moving when the puck gets muddy. And I was talking to John off camera about this before we got back on. And I was like, I watched his game the other day versus when he was on Indiana. I watched his game versus Ohio State, where I think they lost still, but I mean, he tore it up, and it was with Ty Freifogel and some of these other guys. And then watching him now at Washington, his athleticism got absolutely, completely zapped from all these injuries to his lower body. And you can see it because at Indiana, I remember thinking like, he's a decent athlete, like not Caleb Williams, not Spencer Rattler, Bo Nix, where he can just, kind of do anything he wants. He's a shortstop, but he can move and run and throw. Now, completely different guy. And that's got to be troubling for scouts and coaches, GMs to watch on tape too and think like, holy shit, if he's declined this much just in college, like what are we expecting out of him in the NFL? And when he starts taking these hits, like how can we rely on him to stay healthy? I get the concerns with him for sure. Like there's not,
what's interesting is we're talking about Penix. What's really interesting is you've got long looping motion, weird angle release, pocket guy, Who does that sound like?
Phillip Rivers?
Bingo.
Yeah.
Phillip Rivers had all that stuff, but I think the difference here too, you guys know, I think everybody knows at this point. I grew up, Phillip Rivers is my favorite player. Like,
Yeah, I love Phillip.
he's so awesome, so cool. And then I loved watching him play it too, because he just, such an unorthodox player, but making it work. The difference is Michael Penix is 6'2", 216. Rivers, when he came out, was 6'5", 229.
Yeah.
And he still reset and move in the pocket, So that's really what scares me about Penix. I'm right there, which is funny. Like, we're like, I don't know, maybe have we established a group think here over the last several months doing this podcast together where we're like agreeing about everything now?
That's a whole different episode, but yes.
I don't think so. Based off last episode,
yes.
I don't know about that yet. We'll see.
That's a summer episode to talk about.
Yeah.
So 2 things with that. One, like you said, you mentioned a couple episodes, Gam, like, do quarterbacks have the answers to the problem? I feel like you mentioned, like, that's the perfect example with Penix of you feel like he can't adjust his arm and make those adjustments without losing kind of accuracy. At least that's the way I saw it. And based on what you said, I think that. So that's kind of my issue is, like, I want the guy to be able to answer it. I don't have to answer everything deep and, like, way crazy situations, but, like, short, intermediate, you've got to be able to be consistent in that kind of down in, down out type passing. And I felt like the limitations that he has with his arm really scare me in that regard, because sure, he has some beautiful touch balls, sure, he has some flashes, but it's not that type of consistency when you put pressure on him that I would like to see. And then 2, what really convinced me, honestly, did you guys watch the video of him where they mirrored it, they flipped it, and you watch him throw a righty?
Yeah. I did actually.
That actually made me feel better, because I'm like, maybe I'm just seeing the angle of his release and all that in his motion. Maybe I'm just hard on it because it's lefty. And after watching it righty, I'm like, no, that's just a long motion that just I don't think he can adjust. So
There's
it made me feel a little bit more confident in it.
There's no shoulder flexibility to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. He doesn't have like that loose arm. Like we always talk about, like when we compare him to baseball players, we want our quarterback to kind of be able to be the shortstop sometimes and just kind of throw when everything around him isn't perfect. His feet aren't set. His torso is facing the wrong way, or his hips are facing the wrong way. Penix really has to be in line and get like. There's no shoulder. There's no whip. There's no loose flexibility, and that's got. I mean, we saw like the Michigan game after the Texas game. We were all high on him, or the media was, and then we watched Texas or Michigan, and they make him move at all, and you can see like that everything's dead. The balls are dead, velocity's dead, accuracy's gone. It's crazy, and that's you're projecting that to the NFL. Like that's what you want to see him do in the NFL is like extend plays, be able to move and all that. We clearly saw how hard that is for him.
Let's talk a little bit about that real quick too, because I think you guys, I've talked about it a little bit. I've been going through all the rosters in the league and pulling all this data, collecting it, measurements, how people tested when they came out, just to kind of see what teams are looking for, right, in their position groups, because typically you can find trends and see fits based on what they're looking for analytically, right? One thing about Penix that's important to note is when he went to the combine, he measured in with 33 and 5/8 inch arms. Those are some long
huge hands
quarterback. Yeah, huge hands, 10 and 4/8, so 10.5 inch hands. So if you want the list of quarterbacks currently projected to start in the NFL with 33 and 5/8 inch arms, how many do you think there are?
0. I know the answer is 0, right?
That would be correct. 0.
Wow, not even Herbert, not even Lawrence.
No, I looked it up actually.
Yeah.
I had
how many do you think have over 33 inch arms?
I guess 0 now.
Probably 4 to 5.
That would be about correct. I'm going to give you the list.
Okay.
Lamar Jackson, 33 and 1/8. Josh Allen, 33 and 2/8. Deshaun Watson, 33. Matthew Stafford, 33 and 2/8.
Wow. Quarter. 2/8. Fairly.
Well, yeah, I put everything in eighths. I don't get everything fucked up while I'm trying to look at it. And Mahomes, 33 and 2/8.
Interesting.
5?
So 5.
That's 5.
There's
That's
5.
Bingo.
That's it. That's
wow.
it. Okay, so when you think about these guys, Stafford, pretty good release, pretty quick, right? Mahomes has all the arm slots that he can use. Stafford has the arm slots as well.
Yeah.
Allen has the arm slots. Not Mahomes. Because we already hit him. Watson has the arm slots.
Yeah,
Lamar Jackson's got the arm slots. You see arm slots for Michael Penix Jr.?
No, he really does not. And that's funny because you would think like having a long lever is a good thing for like the whip and the power of his arm, which he has for sure. Like we've all agree on that. But it does give you more room for error and kind of like more to control. And he's like almost so long levered that it's like it's just this big looping weird thing he has to control. It's not a tight compact motion, and that's exactly what we see on tape.
Even Rivers had 32 and 1/8 inch arms.
Yeah, Rivers had the
John,
wheels release.
I've got the numbers pulled up here. So I saw he came in at 33.5 Senior Bowl actually put that out. Remember when they posted the quarterback rooms and stuff like that, like the position groups, and they posted the measurements from spring, and I saw that. I went back through. Here are the drafted quarterbacks, 33 and a half plus since 2011, okay? Kellen Mond, Dwayne Haskins, Paxton Lynch, Cardale Jones, Nate Sudfeld, Sean Mannion, EJ Manuel, Nick Foles, Brock Osweiler, Ryan Mallett, Colin Kaepernick, Cam Newton.
Not shocking, a lot of those. Wow.
And a lot of those, most of those guys are over 6'2".
Yeah, those are tall.
Mannion's the only one that you listed that wasn't over 6'2", if I remember correctly.
No, Mannion was like 6'5".
Yeah, Mannion was pretty big. Kellen Mond was on the smaller side. Kellen Mond was like, I think 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, that's right.
But most of those guys were all really, really tall.
Those are big dogs. Jeez.
Yeah,
see, that's the thing. For the guys that are so high on Michael Penix Jr., it's really weird because a lot of and there's I forget his name on Twitter, but I interact with him sometimes, and all he says is like, this guy throws an amazing deep ball, and I'm like, when is that the recipe for an NFL team winning like consistently, like deep ball? There's
an argument that can be made that, and I think I just read this to you, from a quarterback's coach that I was talking to, where he made the case that Penix. Nobody in the country throws a climb, comeback, corner, glance, or dig on time like he can, which is true. That's absolutely true. And those are the big 5 routes for NFL guys.
If the NFL was a 7-on-7, Michael Penix might be the first overall pick in the draft, but it's not a 7-on-7, and that's gotten him into trouble on tape so far. Is like
So if you like Penix, I think what it kind of comes down to is you haven't adjusted, first off, to the need for mobility in the league, right? I think that's the first thing. The second thing is you're willing to live with the bad drives where you can't protect him. He gets under pressure, he gets under duress, because you know that when you can protect him, he's going to run your offense on time. I don't think that's just not the quarterback that I prefer at this point anymore. I don't want to deal with the Kirk Cousins type at all.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Do you think it's possible like his ceiling is Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely possible.
But I think that's the problem, is that would probably be his like ceiling. So that's what you're hoping he becomes, like, the best case scenario, and that's still. You're living with issues.
Kirk's had a good career, but it's good. It's not great. It's not Super Bowl.
Yeah,
he's had some good teams around him too. Like especially while he's been in Minnesota. There's no reason they shouldn't have made a playoff run last year. None. What happened? Yeah. And so it's like, and I think that quarterback show on Netflix I said last year, I meant the year before. The quarterback show on Netflix did a really good job portraying him and showing just the amount of work that he has to put in to stay at that level of his game. Because the quarterback position has evolved to the point where you have to be able to move, you have to be able to run, make things happen, create plays, all these different things. And Kirk can't really do that, and I think that's what you're dealing with when you get Penix. And to me, at this point, that's a career backup to me at best. I'm not going to draft this guy to be the fucking face of my franchise. I'm not. Like you are. I might be okay with you as a backup, but that's about it. And that's if I've got a left-handed starter. I don't want to take. This is one thing that people don't talk about a lot either. The rotation of the ball is different. Receivers
Tough
talk
for
about it all the
receivers
time.
to adjust. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
tough.
and so if you go from let's say I'm the Denver Broncos, right? And maybe the Denver Broncos is a bad example. They don't really have a set quarterback right now, do they?
No.
New Orleans Saints, right? I'm New Orleans Saints. I've got Derek Carr in there. Derek Carr gets hurt. I put in Penix. Now my receivers have to adjust to not just the receivers, the offensive line too, because my left tackle is no longer my blindside protector. That's my right tackle. So now the line has to adjust. They have to play it a little bit differently because now their role is changing. Then you have on the wide receivers, you've got the rotation of balls different. It looks different coming out. That's why we had to flip it around to see what his release looked like on that video that you mentioned earlier, Jarvis. Like, it's really difficult for receivers to make that adjustment. Now, if you're working with them all the time, like the Washington guys were, Odunze and McMillan and Polk, and they're all going to be in the NFL. They're all great, but they were working their first team reps with him. They were able to make that adjustment when he got on campus 2 years ago.
You're also asking teams to flip around the playbook a lot because a lot of concepts teams run, they run it a certain side because yeah. And then now your play action game is different because when you roll out and everything, now the offensive line is flipped too. It's not that those things can't be done, but it's tougher than I think you'd think to get all 11 consistently in sync every single play. Doing something they're not used to is it's a challenge. So
if I'm Miami.
Penix.
I might be okay with spending in the third, fourth round pick if Penix is still there on the board and taking him and saying
he might win that.
Tua's played one full season, I got to protect him and have a guy that can come in here and play and run the system. I think he'd be a good fit in Miami. That's a timing based offense. Now, would the offensive line protect him? Fuck, I don't know.
Yeah. That's the other thing too about Penix is like over the middle of the field, a lot of that short intermediate stuff, it felt like he's late. He's a touch late. His touch on the ball is also different too. He really can drive it, but Daniel Jeremiah keeps talking about this. He's not an up-down thrower. Like that ability to kind of layer the ball through the layers of the defense, he's not great at that yet. He's got the hose of an arm. It's like, yeah, he can throw it through a wall, but can he throw it in between two walls? Like that's been a tough ask for him so far. So yeah, that's a good name to bring up, Marky. You guys know who I like? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to say, you talked about the flipping the offense and doing this and that format. I think the one word that came to my mind, and I think it kind of captures probably all of our thoughts, but particularly my thoughts, is rigidity. Whatever you do with Penix, whether it's, the offense or, the way he plays, it's rigidity. Yeah.
I think you said virginity. I was like, bro.
No. Rigidity. Rigid.
Yeah. I got you.
But yeah, just like everything you're going to do with him, you have to have a structure there around him. And it's just so built for him. Yeah. And I feel like that's the opposite of where the game's going right now.
I agree. Yeah, that's the tough part.
Well,
I don't think
go into that game. I'll give you a guy that I like.
Yeah,
that I'm bringing up because he's an outlier. Especially by like first round type talent, second round type talent standards, where I think he's going to go. I don't know if he goes first, but I think he's definitely going to come off the board second round. I don't think he's going to get to the third.
Is it Malachi Corley?
No, actually, I like him too, but that's no. Defensive tackle out of Florida State, transfer from Western Michigan, Braden Fisk.
Here we go.
We've done this.
Well, I'm bringing him up because he fits this. Okay, he fits this parameter. I love Braden. Now I also did some research and found that there's like two guys in the last 11, 12 years that have been drafted in the first round at the defensive line position with less than 32-inch arms, and one of them was Kalijah Cansey. I forget who the other one was off the top of my head, but I might be even be the first two rounds. So, point is, he's typically not a guy that people take until the third round. So his frame and everything, he's got 31-inch arms, right on 31 inches. Yeah. His frame, everything about him athletically, the measurements would suggest third, fourth round talent. But you watch him athletically, like you watch him. He's disruptive. He gets into the backfield. He knows how to use his hands. He's got an understanding of the game. That's beyond most defensive linemen. Like,
I think the
guy's
good thing
monster.
about him, he's not, and this sounds, but he's not the typical like effort white guy where you're like, yeah, he's like slow and he's strong, so we'll stand him in a spot and like he'll be good at that. He's like an actual upfield disruptor, so he's probably going to get the benefit of a team that drafts him is not like, use him like Harrison. What's the guy's name from Stanford? That Harrison Phillips, I believe, that went to Buffalo. Like the team's not going to ask him to be a run-stopping two gap or whatever. He's probably going to be an actual three technique, or he's going to be something in a one gap where he gets to actually be athletic and be like the upfield penetrator that he actually is. So that's a good thing. I think like his arms being the outlier are tough, but when you ask him to be something completely different than, like just looking at him might suggest, you probably could maximize him a little easier than some of these other guys that were like, he's an outlier, or like he's not going to go first round, but he'll still be good. Like he might be different. And he's such a smart player on tape too. We've talked about that too. Like there's,
well, I had the opportunity to sit down and talk with him for 30 minutes at the Senior Bowl too. Like, because we built that relationship before the season even started, before he played it down at Florida State. Because I'd watched him at Western Michigan and really liked his game, and so there was some familiarity there where I could take that time and get that opportunity when he wasn't as busy on that Friday before the game, but like. Sitting there, and we talked about life. We talked about, a little bit about philosophy. So he's like a guy that's like really into the way people think and those types of processes. He's into understanding how he wants to be used, how he wants to be schemed, how defensive lines work, what his plan is going into a rep, how he attacks people. He's a true Savian of the game. Like that's what makes him stand out to me. Is there's a lot of these guys that you can have these conversations with, that you can talk to, that you're just kind of sitting there like, okay, yeah, you're going to be a space eater. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not trying to insult nobody. I'm not going to say any names, but like, you're like, yeah, you're a space eater. You're going to be a power rush guy. We're going to bring you in. You're going to play 35% of the rotation, and that's about it, right? I'm not going to expect you to light up stat sheets or anything crazy like that or make big plays all the time. You're going to set up other people to make big plays. But he's ahead of it. He could go be a broadcaster when he's done. He could go coach when he's done. Like he's got personality to him too, where that fits as a leader in a locker room. He walked into Florida State, and after 5 years at Western Michigan, he was an older college player. He walks into a locker room. He's a leader on that team. Like that says a lot about a guy right there too, especially going to a program like Florida State. So I think he's an outlier. We've talked about Jarvis. We talked about inexact science of this process and everything. And one of the things that you really make your money on when you're evaluating talent is hitting the outliers, right? That's one of the things that you can do really well. So if you do that, that's where you start to separate yourself. And I think that Braden, to me, just gut feeling, just all the information that's in front of me, I want to say I'm willing to take that bet and say, yeah, Braden, and I can get roasted for this in the future if I'm wrong. I'm going to take that bet and say Braden Fisk is going to be one of those players like Dean Lowry was in the prime of his career. Like I think those two are very similar players. They're going to be really productive.
Speaking of outliers, Mark, you got something?
Oh no, I was just gonna ask John. John, let's fast forward. Okay, we are now we're 2 years into the future, and Fisk. Actually, I'll give you a little bit more. 4 years into the future, and Fisk has just been complete nothing in the NFL. Like he's just done nothing at all. Why? What happened?
Couldn't create separation, I guess, would be the only thing I can think. I think he's I don't that's probably why I'm betting on him being an outlier. I don't see him not being good. That's my problem probably. I don't see how he fails.
I guess the expectations would play a big part of it, Well,
I'm not expecting him to come in here and be a double-digit sack guy. I'm expecting him to be that 6'8", that type of player where he's just a solid player. He makes plays probably in the 40-50 tackle range. And, you're going to play him 50% of your snaps. He's going to start.
Yeah,
And
there might be a
he's going to make a
possibility.
second contract, probably maybe a third.
There might be a possibility that I think, Jarvis, that his athleticism doesn't stand out in the NFL, and his arm length kind of doesn't allow him to be what he could be if he had more length. You know what I mean? Like if he's in constant phone booth wrestling matches with NFL guards and centers, that might be tough for him. You know, that he might not be athletic and strong enough to overcome that. I think the goal is to make him an upfield penetrator to where people are reacting to him instead of like getting ready for him. You want guards and centers to be kind of chasing him and basically like covering him. You don't want them to be like, I'm ready, like come through me, because I don't think he's that guy. I think that's the reason. That's why he could bust, is if you kind of don't maximize like what he really is. And it's a really quick, agile upfield guy. And, you know, we've seen a lot of defensive linemen like him kind of bust, because it's like Taven Bryan from Florida, who's a first rounder. I think he just signed with the Colts, but he was so athletic and twitched up. And immediately when he goes to an NFL team and they ask him to be stout at all or be anything more than just an under tackle who's basically blowing up the backside of plays, he's awful. And it was almost like his athleticism's gone. He's thinking too much. He's not the level of athlete that you need to be. And I was super high on him, and he busts. You know what I mean? And hopefully that's not what Fisk is. But I think you really have to kind of put this guy in a position to win early and often, or else you're going to get someone that's not necessarily versatile. You know, that arm length and his over athleticism doesn't make him super, super versatile. He's not Aaron Donald. He's not Chris Jones. He's not Geno Atkins. He's not the freaks of the world. So he's got to work hard at it. But, you know, I like him too. I think if he goes in the second round, I won't.
Freak. I mean, 4.78 40. Like,
I mean, are we like
4.37
how
shuttle
freaky is he?
at 295?
Right. And like, okay, so I'd say he's above average, right? Like but you still want him to be that guy,
bro.
You still want him to be the upfield penetrator. Like,
John,
yeah. But he's 295. That's what I'm saying. He's 295, and he's running a 4.78 and a 4.31.
Yeah, that's insane. I'm just pointing out like reasons why he might, like why we could say like, it didn't work for him.
It's
I mean?
so hard
That's all
for
I'm
me
saying.
to see it. That might be part of my problem with the eval. Is like I really can't see a world where he doesn't work, because he did it at Florida State. He was a monster at Western Michigan.
Yeah.
And he tested well above average for 295.
Yeah. No, like I said, I think he'll be good too.
Here's a scenario for you. Let's say he gets hurt and he loses some of that athleticism. So he's call it a couple 2 steps slower. Does he still have? Well, I say because like take a, you know, like I'll use Mason Smith as an example, right? He's like what, 6'5", 310 with like 35-inch arms. Even if he loses a couple steps, like he has the length and size to really be a kind of a mountain in the middle of your defense. Whereas Fisk, if he loses that step, what's he have left?
Right. His trump card is that, and without that, it's like, can you?
You don't have the length then at that point to kind of make up for it, to where like at that point, what do you really have? You know.
And he doesn't have like Byron Murphy's lower body, so that's tough.
That's fair.
That's tough.
Always a way to find a way to.
Damn it, Jarvis.
Speaking of outliers, real quick, I just want to pop 2 names on here. So Mike Sanderstill, the nickel corner from Michigan, and Ennis Rakestraw, the corner from Missouri. I think Rakestraw came in at like 5'11", 183. Mike Sanderstill came in at 5'9", 185 or something. So neither of them are like big guys. I've seen Ennis Rakestraw mocked in so many first-round drafts, and I can't figure out that. Feisty, sticky cover guy, like really is a sticky dude. Somehow, but it's not always pretty. But my problem with him is he's not big. He's not fast. Play strength on tape is more like he's an agitator versus being I'm strong. And I don't know if he has the speed and the twitch to stay outside. I don't know if you put him inside. Maybe that's where you maximize him. But Mike Sanders still similar, where he's too small to play outside. When he's in the nickel, like that's great. He's a good cover man. Fast enough. I think he ran like 4.42 or 4.47. So he's fast enough, but I think that size is always going to give him a little trouble. The length is bad. The size is bad. Like, there's just things about both these guys where I ask myself, how do you maximize them as a pro? Ironically, I think I'm higher on Sainris still than Rakestraw. I don't know why yet, and I'm wondering if it's because one's been projected outside and one everyone will know he's a nickel. But I do think that Rakestraw is that guy where, look, he might go on to be a great cornerback number 2 for an NFL team. I'm just not willing to bet my money on him, and I don't think that the first round mocks that I see him in are like, that's crazy to me. I'm just like, you can't take a cornerback that your best projection for him is like, he's a good number 2, maybe. And that's probably him hitting his like ceiling. So there's this DB, like we were talking about this too off the camera. This DB class is terrible. As far as like the safeties it's rough. Tyler Newbin went to his day, ran what you just said, Mark, I think a 4.62.
Yeah.
So already it's like if any of these safeties make it out and are great players, like they're probably going to be outliers. The corner class is tough. So I'm just searching through them all, watching all their tape and trying to find guys that stand out. Sainer still does. He's a playmaker. I think he's still kind of young at the position. Some of the things he does, I'm like, you probably should have seen that coming, or you should have read this route.
He moved from wide receiver like last year.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So he's brand new to playing DB.
Right. And then on top of that, like I said, his size, his length isn't great. So I wonder like what you do to maximize him. Does he hold up at nickel? Is he too small for even that? But he's a good player. So is Rakestraw. Like I said, how you maximize. I always ask that when I look at players, like how do I maximize his skill set as a pro? These two are tough for me. And like I said, I would draft Sanders still first. I'm willing to miss on Rakestraw just because I think when I look for corners, I kind of want like the freakier of the bunch. Or maybe a little more than he gave as far as the combine goes. I know he kind of pulled his hamstring and he ran a 4.51, but it's just the tape looked slow anyway. So I'm like, I don't know if this changes much for me. I don't think he's a fast play speed guy. So,
yeah.
But
so
rough DB class.
I think Rakestraw gets mocked into the first round because I think when you look at probably the prospects, if you had a big board from 25 to 60, very even across the board. Any of those guys, you could really go. Maybe even 20 to 60.
I know what you're saying.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, when you have, a guy like Rakestraw who might be a top 5 corner in the class, which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
All it takes is one team to really like him and say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and pull the trigger and make sure we get him here in the first round. I'm not saying I think he goes, but I think that's why you see him in some of the mocks because there's so like the first and second round is going to the end of the first and the entire second round to be blended in terms of talent and what is readily available. So
yeah,
Jarvis, you got one left?
Blind demand.
Yeah, I got one more. I will want to throw it real quick though. Like you're talking about how he kind of gets pushed up in these mocks. One thing that kind of stands out to me, I think, is I don't think there's necessarily I don't think consensus and in general people doing mocks have really priced in the fact that he's not a good tester. I think getting a little bit of hype early on from like DJ kind of pushed Rakestraw up and it hasn't really deflated down because like you look at Rakestraw, you see a 5'11", 183 corner who ran 4.5. You got like Max Melton is 5'11", 187, ran a 4.3. So guys like that tested through the roof and are in that same bucket, I think you're going to go and get pushed up way ahead of Rakestraw. I'd be surprised if Rakestraw with that type of profile goes in the top 2 rounds. We've seen crazier things, but it's just a very anti-cornery profile in a position where athleticism.
The tape is good enough, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
The guy I want to throw out is Braylon Trice, and I know John, you're very much in the vein of I'm gonna find the outlier and I'm gonna trust it and I'm gonna go with that. I'm that complete opposite. It's really funny to me because Trice, I was already kind of sketched out by him on tape, and I was like, okay, maybe this guy's like a 3rd roundish guy. 6 foot 3.5, 270 on the roster measurement, probably played around there. Shorter arm guy, not super lengthy or anything, but real violent, aggressive pass rusher, so on and so forth. Just had really solid tape. Guy who's aggressive with his approach and refined in a lot of ways. But then he goes to the combine and he dropped 25 pounds. So he's 6 foot 3.5, but now he's 245, 32.5 inch arms, and he runs like a 4.7. So he dropped all this weight. What would he have run if he was 270? Was he a 4.8 guy? Was he a 4.9 guy? Like, the name that just keeps coming back to me is Bradley Anae. And Anae was a heck of a college player, right? Really productive, had really powerful hands, was just really good for the level of competition that he faced. But when you're talking about bigger, longer, more athletic people, I really have a hard time getting over that with Trice. And I don't know where he ends up going. I see he's still mocked in like the top, 50, top 75. I just will never bet on a guy who does not have a defensive end, prototypical height, weight, speed, length, the necessary ingredients to take on a guy who's, 6'6", 300 pounds and long and freakish as hell, like most starting NFL offensive tackles are.
If he was like super bendy and fluid and all that, maybe you could bump him up a little more and say like, well, he has ways to kind of soften the edge and, get around offensive tackles. But even on tape, before he tested anything, I was like, man, as soon as he gets to the top of the arc, like he is lost. Like he can't flip his hips. There's no ability to kind of dip, bend. There's nothing there. Like he either beats them initially or he can go through them, but there's nothing that he can do at the top of his rush. And then he goes to the combine and tests so bad. I'm wondering why his agent let him test. Like if he's running 4.7 at 245, like, buddy, I know you're my client, love you, but you're not testing. We're not going to do this. There's no chance. I don't know.
Well, that was the only thing that he did at the combine. Like he opted out of every other test.
I think he's like, I'm not going to hurt myself more.
But
I don't know.
I was just going to say, for me, I look at that profile, like you said, he's not a guy who's real bendy. He's not a guy who like has the twitch and the get off to really threaten. Because I know you've probably seen guys like that where they're not necessarily bendy around the arc, but they have that. They have enough twitch and they have enough lateral agility. They can kind of set it up to where they can win back inside with it, and they mix in their hands and they can still find ways. But it was really just all power or nothing, right? And so when I think of that type of profile, I think, okay, maybe a guy who should get up into 280 range, 285, and be like a Boogie Basham, where your team might look at you and be like, okay, maybe we can kick this guy inside some. Maybe we can move him around, and that's what you're thinking. And then he goes the other way, and it's like, okay, well, he's definitely not going to be like an off-ball guy. Like he's not going to be like, what do we do with him if he's going to be coming in 245 like this? So I don't know. I really hope he ends up by the end of the process putting back that weight on, trying to maybe salvage by being, okay, now I'm going to show you I'm more of a, defensive end, defensive tackle type guy rather than go the other way and be like a defensive and outside linebacker type guy.
Yeah, he's a big outlier for sure.
It scares the hell out of me.
47 minutes, and I think it's about time to wrap it up, gentlemen. I think it's been 3 really good episodes.
Man, oh man.
From lessons we've learned to these guys now, kind of applying those lessons. So probably got another episode of this left in us too if we wanted to.
Yeah, probably do. I got more names, but I figured we had to keep it short, and we're already at 48 minutes. So.
Yeah, about to crack it. So I'm sure Shane back there, he's ready to get to bed and be like, yeah, man, Canada.
Let him go watch hockey.
Yeah, got to do that. So we love you, Shane. So Mark Jarvis at Jarvis Scouting, Justin Gamble at Gam Scouting, myself at Draft Vogel. Follow the show at SickPod NFL Draft, and we'll be back at it later this week. Shane, let's get out of here.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.